The nonprofit Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary is made up of highly trained emergency rescue volunteers, the men and women who are on the vessels that respond to marine emergencies in BC. It is my pleasure to welcome members Bruce Falkins and Mike Cupit to Studio 4 to tell us more. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're on the sea.
Morning, Fanny.
Just in case there's a leak in the boat. And I know more things happen than that.
Yes.
Yes. So tell me about the auxiliary. When started?
It was started almost 30 years ago. It brought together a collection of volunteers that were doing marine search and rescue in Canada, and was organized by the federal government to provide insurance and a little bit of compensation for fuel for the volunteers that provide marine search and rescue, and it's grown to something much, much larger than that now with, I think we do about 25 or 30% of all the marine search and rescues in Canada.
Really? So how closely do you work with the Canadian Coast Guard? Do you work with them at all, or together, everybody
all the time
has a position all the time?
Well, when we go out on an incident, usually the Canadian Coast Guard will be tasked at the same time, and we go out and we help them out.
Okay. So they're tasked to actually go there, and you're the helpers, or sometimes you are simply the rescuers? Whoever gets there first, I would think.
That's right. Obviously, you know, we have a very large coastline in British Columbia, and a very large coastline in Canada. The Canadian Coast Guard can't be everywhere rather. It's difficult. So small communities up and down this coast, Arctic communities, East Coast communities, they all have Coast Guard auxiliary units in them. And often, although Rescue Center will task resources, the nearest and best resource is almost always a Coast Guard auxiliary resource.
And as you know so well, there are a lot of silly boaters. And there are some drunk boaters, and there are some captains who don't know anything about tides or rocks or what they're doing.
Yes, yeah. And by the same token, there are some people that honestly, through no fault of their own, have managed to get themselves into difficulty.
Yes, I was on a boat just out here with the Canadian coastal pilot, of all people, who knows a lot about the seas, and the propeller sheared off and went through our hull. Yes. Yeah. And so it was great because the Coast Guard was there, and we're thinking, Mayday? He's joking. Yeah. But it really was one. Yeah. What is a Mayday? Like, when is it a Mayday? When isn't it a Mayday?
Mayday is when life is at risk. It's the most urgent call. It's usually all the vessels around the area should go and help out as well. So that's when we get tasked out.
Yeah.
It's,
right.
Imminent danger.
Imminent danger. So how do you train for Auxiliary Coast Guard? Who trains you?
The Coast Guard and the Coast Guard Auxiliary have come together with a standard training standard, and then we developed out here in the West Coast training manuals, and once you progress through crew level, eventually you go to a Coast Guard run school in Bamfield, where they teach you how to rough water handle vessels, called the Riot School, rigid hull inflatable offshore training.
So no swift water rescue?
No.
No, just on the sea.
It's rough enough out there. We don't need to get into swifter water.
I bet it is. Yeah. Well, and the stories you have to tell. I was talking to my friend, Scotty Grubb, who said they've got some amazing stories, these boys. One about the wife who called Mayday after thinking her husband had fallen overboard.
Yeah.
But he hadn't, or what?
No, it was. They were on their way to Gibson's from Vancouver, got off Point Atkinson, the boat rocked and rolled. She was down below, he was up on the bridge. She picked up their little intercom telephone to call him. He didn't answer, so she got on the radio and started calling Mayday. My husband's fallen overboard, I don't know where I am, please come and help and rescue me. She knew where she'd left and where she was going, she didn't know where she was in between. So we used a radio direction finder to get out to her, and we pulled up alongside this beautiful trawler, and there's a gentleman steering the boat. We asked him if he was the one who called Mayday, and he's on the bridge going, no, and she's down below hanging onto the cockpit combing going, yes.
No. See, at least he wasn't in the bathroom or something.
No, but it was quite embarrassing to see his face when he walked to the back of the bridge and looked down to his wife and said, what have you done?
And, well, at least she cared about him enough to do something.
That's right, yeah. Well, it kind of reinforces when you're out in the water, you've got to have some capability. You can't, my wife is the good-looking accessory, but at some point they have to have the knowledge to be able to stop the boat and use
I've always felt that we had a small plane, a little Cessna, and I didn't have a proper pilot's license, but I knew how to take off and land, just in case.
Yes.
Because if somebody flops, you need to know, at least in at sea, especially a rough sea, you have to know how to steer the boat.
Yep.
Or keep it upright.
Exactly.
Or stop it.
Yeah.
Or stop it.
Or stop
that too.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
When do you find more sailors, sailboats, or power boats get into more trouble, or can you tell really?
I don't know, Mike. What do you think?
Vessels on rocks.
It's a mix of each. You know,
Sure.
it's sometimes it's more the smaller boats than the bigger boats, but then sometimes in the bigger boats you get bigger problems. So it all depends.
More
True.
people.
Yeah.
Boat fires.
Yeah. Had a few.
Yeah, they represent, I think, about 14 or 15% of our incidents.
Okay, and your territory is from where to where?
We're
Is that
based
what you
out
say on the sea, territory, or
in operating area.
operating area?
We, along with a number of other units, do most of Howe Sound, about half of English Bay, and out in the direction of the Nanaimo.
Okay, and there's rules for talking on the radio, I know.
Sure.
Certainly in the air, there's rules for talking on the radio. But sometimes, I don't know, people have too much to drink or whatever they do, and you hear whole conversations.
Yeah, yeah, on Channel 16, yeah.
Yeah.
The licensing isn't as strictly enforced as we'd liked. Yeah.
So be careful.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What about safety equipment on board? No matter if you're, a 32-foot or a rowboat.
It depends on the size of your vessel. So as you start off in a smaller vessel, you need a certain amount of items, and as you get to a larger vessel, then the more safety items are required. And it's all through Transport Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. We do vessel exams where we go to marinas, yes, and do vessel exams.
Okay.
Check out their equipment, make sure it's appropriate and that they've got the right equipment, and issue them a decal that says they've been inspected.
And do you do medical transport as well if somebody's isolated on one of the islands? And
yes, we do. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
What else?
Well, it's
somebody goes aground.
Somebody goes aground. Somebody runs out of fuel. Often we're looking for people that are overdue. Husband says, I'll be home at 6. Wife phones Rescue Center at 7. Says, my husband didn't come home. Husband could be close or he could be broken down.
Right.
We go out and search for them.
How about the guys, they had one life jacket? I think they were guys.
No, it was one man and 2 women. They'd struck Greb Islets, one of the rocks off Greb Islets off West Vancouver. Their boat had sank very, very quickly. We got out there in a minute and a half, 2 minutes. It was very, very close to Fisherman's Cove. And I got into this debris field and called Vancouver on the radio and said, yeah, there's nobody here. There's debris, but I don't see anybody here. And they're saying, well, we're on the phone with the concerned citizen and you're about 100 feet from them. And we motored in that direction. And here, this poor gentleman, he's got the life jacket on. He's about 300 pounds. He's got a woman under each arm. Each of them still have their purses. And the one woman's also clutching a small dog.
Well,
and they're
good
floating,
for the dog.
They're floating with just this much of their face out of the water, each of them on their back, and he's just letting them go. We literally, that's the only time I can honestly say we got to a call where we were able to literally snatch them out of the water as they were going down. But they had only had one life jacket on board.
Wow, that's not enough. Well, not the
support
way
3
I
people.
swim, that's not
No,
enough. It doesn't
no.
matter how well you swim either, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you're in trouble in the high sea or someplace where it's really rough, you can be a great swimmer, and it's freezing, it's
the rule
all
of thumb
that.
is it's the 1-10-1. So once you go in the ocean, you have 1 minute to use or to gain control of your breathing, because that's one of the most important things. Is if you fall in the ocean, it's called the agonal gasp. When you go like that, if you get a little bit of water and you start sputtering and coughing and ingesting more water, and then most people drown within that first minute.
Really?
Then, so if you can make it past that minute, you have 10 minutes to use your hands before you lose all your dexterity and your use of your hands.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Then after that, you have 1 hour to live in our cold water here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, you're
So
better to
1-10-1.
fall out in the Caribbean,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Oh, much better.
Yeah.
I'd love to be
Yeah,
down
so
there.
what's your day job?
I drive a water taxi and own a small water taxi company. So
Okay, so you live on the sea and work on the sea.
work on the sea. Yeah.
So to speak.
Yes.
And what about you?
I'm an electrical contractor.
Really? And how long have you been in the Coast Guard?
About 11 years or more.
What are the rewards
Oh,
for you?
For me?
Like, why is it worth it? Because when you volunteer, there's not a lot of money
No,
coming
no,
in.
no, no,
No.
It's the training, the camaraderie. You're with like-minded people. It's a good. Some of my best friends are in the auxiliary, and the training is top notch. Just the fact of helping people really.
Sure.
When you actually make a difference, it really.
And on the sad days and in the dark days when you have to pick up a body or somebody who didn't make it, is there psychological counseling or anything like
yes,
that?
there is, yeah.
There is, because everything doesn't have a happy ending, as you know.
No, it's a lot of what we do doesn't have happy endings.
Right, exactly. But it makes us aware of if you're going to enjoy the summer, make sure you're equipped, because most of it's preventable, wouldn't you say?
Virtually all of it's preventable. Virtually all of it. We're seeing a lot more small vessels, kayaks, surfboards. We've got people that are out paddling, standing on surfboards, and they go out without having a complete understanding of what the wind and tide is going to do at certain points. We're in an area here where we've often got 3 knots of tide. They get into trouble. They're not in the situation where they could pick up a telephone or anything. They have very little equipment. Mike was on a call not that long ago where some kayakers were up near Porto, and that had a very, very bad outcome.
Oh dear. Yeah, I know, because if even being on a surfboard, you can end up in Nanaimo or something. You go, what happened?
Yeah.
Good work you do.
Thank you very much,
Nice
Fanny.
to meet you. Thank you for doing this. Bruce Falkins and Mike Cupit, they are Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary.